Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
The wife went on a business trip to Africa, but succumbed to the local men who were there, and the inevitable happened. Today's story has a similar plot. Enjoy watching it. The Commissioner of Health concluded a lavish speech about the winner of the award in the category County Physician of the Year. He waved his right hand wide, indicating the honoree to step up to the podium to receive the award. She was a stunningly beautiful red-haired woman who looked 10 years younger than her 33 years. Simone O'Reilly was a tall woman whose mane of red hair flowed down to her white shoulders like rings of fire falling onto ice. She was the most amazing woman in the room and also my wife. I'm James O'Reilly, known to my friends as Jimmy. I have been married to Simone for over 10 years. When we got married, I was 20 and she was 22. Simone often jokes that she married a child, but the truth is that in most cases, I am the older and more responsible party. From an early age, my wife studied to become a doctor. She cut herself off from the boys and parties part of her life and focused on becoming a doctor. So, I found her, an inexperienced 21-year-old virgin, at the wrong frat party. She was dragged there by her roommate to celebrate their acceptance into medical school together. It was the spring semester of the school year. The Deltas were kind and invited the Sigmas to their spring party. 6 or 7 of my Sigma brothers decided to take advantage of the free beer offer and took me along. The party lasted until late in the early morning. I noticed 3 Deltas dragging a tall red-headed girl into the back room. She was very drunk but still resisted. Well, I couldn't just stand there, could I? I intercepted them and tried to convince the 3 big men who were not in a good mood themselves. One big guy objected and swung at me. It was the last thing he did that evening. I only hit that idiot once. My fraternity mates stepped in and started smashing the Deltas' heads. I may have saved the girl, but in the end, she had to save us. Campus police showed up to break up the fight. Unfortunately, by the time they arrived, a couple dozen Deltas were already lying down, and my brothers were separating the rest. Yes, one of those Sigmas, the bad boys on campus, was me. The redhead had sobered up a little by this time and was convincing enough to persuade the cops that we had saved her from intimate assault. After that, Simone, the redhead, and I went down the path that was supposed to end in marriage, and it happened barely a year later, just at the end of her first year of medical school. In terms of years, my wife was older and more mature in her career, but she was also younger than me in life experience. After her medical degree, my law degree, and 2 children a year later, she was named Doctor of the Year. My wife, a pediatric surgeon, earned this title after spending the previous year with Doctors Without Borders. From the very beginning, I realized how lucky I was to have bumped into Simone at that party. Randomness is a strange thing, or was it a chance? Is there some divine force guiding our destiny? When we met, Simone was a potential nerdy medical student waiting to emerge from her cocoon, a pupa that is about to turn into a butterfly. I wasn't the only one who thought so. My cynical fraternity brothers shook their heads at my good fortune. Why did an Irish idiot like Jimmy O'Reilly get a woman like that, they thought. After all, I was nothing special, just average academically and athletically. On the other hand, I was, so to speak, much shrewder than the average college kid and very shrewd in my dealings with my fellows. Simone was the complete opposite. She believed in the highest good and nobility of human beings. I confess that I found this aspect of her character more attractive than her physical beauty. She was gorgeous, but as every one of my fraternity mates would attest, it was what was underneath her skin that looked like gold. Among the dross, the word altruism was coined to describe people like Simone. She didn't come into medicine for money, prestige, or security. Simone wanted to help others. There was no way she could stand by and watch another person suffer. If one of my awkward, shy fraternity brothers needed a date, Simone would set him up with one of her nerdy girlfriends. When my brothers drank too much, as they often did, Simone would wipe the vomit off them and help them into bed. After frequent fights, she lubricated their wounds with iodine and wrapped them in bandages. Unlike other girls, she never criticized, grumbled, or scolded anyone. She simply advised not to behave badly, like an indulgent mother. Guys were attracted to Simone by her appearance, but they loved her for her soul. my relationship with my future wife was somewhat different. As soon as Simone put her hand on mine, it stayed there forever. We became a couple. I was her first and only serious partner. We immediately became exclusive. "Simone, do you tolerate any hobbies when we're together, a couple, right?" she asked. I wasn't a fool, I didn't argue with that. Having been chosen by some divine intervention to be with Simone, I was astute enough to know when to take advantage. And of course, Simone captured my heart. It happens to her, if there's even a drop of goodness in your soul, you cannot help but love Simone. So, that Thursday afternoon, I snuck out of the office early to attend a meeting of the County Medical Society. I wasn't invited, the hospital administrator was the wife of a district official. When I went in to register the document, he congratulated me on my wife's award. I pretended that I knew everything my wife didn't tell me about the reward or the meeting. As is her custom, she kept her family and professional lives separate. Thus, I was ruining the novel. Normally, her not inviting me to a medical association meeting would not have raised any questions in my mind. However, the fact that she didn't mention the award made my eyebrows rise. I wanted to see her receive the award and hear her speech. I'm very proud of Simone, but after returning from abroad, she became distant and reserved. Our former warm closeness was replaced by winter coolness. At first, I saw it as a result of her fatigue. She returned to us an emaciated shadow of her former strong personality. But while Simone regained her vigor, we did not regain our former passion. The woman returned, but the wife was still traveling somewhere. Simone seemed to have restored her relationship with our daughters, Vicky, 8, and Beth, 6, but there seemed to be some barrier with her husband that she could not or would not overcome. For 3 months, I waited for my wife to return to me. I missed her and the warm, loving relationship we had. Something changed in our relationship, but I didn't know what exactly. I knew nothing that could explain the distance between me and my wife. I quietly entered the large banquet hall of the Gideon Hotel. Simone hadn't started speaking yet. The hall was filled with almost 1,500 people. I sat at the back of the room next to the bar set up for cocktails. As the performances began, the bartender interrupted the service, but the 2 tall, handsome men were still leaning on the bar sipping their drinks. I recognized one of them as Tony Caroso, MD, a gynecologist at Memorial Hospital where Simone worked. The second had a dark complexion and a more cunning appearance, but he was a handsome fellow. He was wearing an expensive, tailored suit of European cut. I assumed the fancy suit was also a doctor. He had the appearance of a player, just like Caroso. Not being very good, Dr. Caroso always, when he met a young nurse, wanted to put her to bed, and the wedding ring did not stop him. I knew of several cases when he approached Simone, one of which was right in front of me. She always fought back, but he kept coming, like the Energizer Bunny. I stood behind them at the back of the bar. They stood facing the hall, like me, and obviously did not see me, but I was close enough to hear their conversation without straining. "I want to get some of this for myself," said the man in the fashionable suit, nodding towards my wife. Simone approached the podium to begin her speech. "Don't let the red hair fool you, it is frigid," Tony replied. "Maybe there once was, but no longer." "I heard she was having quite a blast in Africa, she really was very hot," the second man said. "Well, it would have been a big change, but it was there," Tony said. "Yes, but once they try it on the side, they never really stop," Dr. Slippery Guy told Tony. "Do you want to argue?" said Tony. "Certainly. How about we double the amount you owe me for that little renovation job I did?" Mr. Slippery said. We agreed. "And to make it more interesting, I'll try to hit on her myself," Tony said, and they both laughed smugly. At this moment, my wife spoke. "I want everyone to know how incredibly honored I am to receive this award from my professional peers. But to be honest, I have to say that you gave it to the wrong person. This award is given to those who have made the ultimate sacrifice for humanity. My work with Doctors Without Borders was not hard for me, it was others who made the real sacrifice, my daughters, who were left without their mother for 14 months, my husband, who became a single parent during that time, and all the family and friends who came to my aid while I was gone. We so often forget about those who stay and support the work on the ground, they make everyday unnoticed contributions. As I accept this award on behalf of my family and friends, I want them and you to know that I appreciate not only their sacrifice but all the tens of thousands of people who have been helped by Doctors Without Borders. We, as healthcare professionals, and our patients, owe a great debt to all those families who have been left without a husband, wife, brother, sister, or child for an extended period of time to bring medical benefit to those who need it most but least can get it. It is therefore with great humility and deep honor that I accept this award for myself and the other volunteer families. When Simone finished, the crowd stood, and there was thunderous applause. "I'm glad you heard that," someone said in my ear. I turned and saw Claire Hudson. She was going down on her tiptoes. At 6 feet 3 inches tall, she had to stand on tiptoes to speak into my ear. Claire, or CLA, was my wife's preferred surgical nurse. Simone loved having CLA next to her in the operating room. CLA was a mother of 3, but you'd never think it at just over 30 years old. She had the figure of a 20-year-old girl and not a single gray strand in her raven hair. She was one of those women who, in common slang, is called a MILF, but she was married to one of the best men I have ever known. Dean Hudson was the best diesel mechanic in our part of the world. If you wanted the best, you went to Hudson. Dean, whom everyone called Dake, was a powerful man, prematurely bald. He gave the impression of a movie tough guy but had the disposition of a kitten. Claire wore the pants in the family. Together, they were the couple Simone and I were closest to, friends whom we often invited over and whose parties we always went to. Our house was often filled with their 3 boys and our 2 girls. This was the case during Simone's absence. I wondered what Simone was doing in Africa without CLA, I said. "I'm very proud of her," I answered Claire. "She loves you very much," Claire said. I looked over to where the bartender was refilling drinks for Tony Caruso and his friend. They grabbed their refreshments and headed out into the crowd, which was beginning to settle down again. "Who is this with Dr. Caruso?" I asked. "Oh, this is Dr. S.A. Faraji, our new chief of surgery," CLA said. I detected hesitation in Claire's voice. Sometimes being a criminal lawyer is not a good thing. It was too obvious to me that CLA was hiding something personal. I ignored it because I saw my wife receiving an award, and it was time to play daddy and pick up my daughters from school. "I have to go," I told CLA, looking at my watch. "Tell Simone that I heard her speech." "Definitely," Claire said. As I turned to leave, in the car on the way to school, I reflected on Dr. Faraji's accusations against my wife. When we met, the woman who would one day be named the state's prettiest doctor was the female equivalent of a nerd. She was a virgin like me. Being called the shrewdest on campus didn't make me any better than the average guy with girls. With Simone, it was different. After our first kiss, I put my brain aside for later and never allowed unkind thoughts to come between us. Simone was the daughter of a banker and an excellent student. If it weren't for a few drunk frat boys, we would never have met. We studied at the same university but in completely different fields. She was an excellent student and was preparing to enter medical school, and I was a sophomore and undecided on the choice of specialty. I was doing pretty well academically, but I wasn't anywhere near her league. We dated throughout the school year, and a week after she graduated, we consummated our romance with a night of intim. When Simone was in medical school, she had an apartment in Albany near the medical center. Dad paid his living expenses, but even his wealth was threatened by medical school tuition. As a result, Simone took out a large student loan. I became a regular guest in Simone's bed. Simone began studying medicine, and I was laying cables for an independent company that subcontracted the electrical grid. At every opportunity, I dropped by her place to disrupt my beloved studies. In hindsight, we should have been more careful. Her parents heard the rumors and were furious. I think Mom and Dad, but mostly Mom, were unprepared for their college-graduated daughter to become a woman. In the end, whether we were ready or not, we were engaged by Christmas and married the following June. I was a junior and a married man, but still relatively carefree and undecided about my major. Everything changed during my senior year. I've never worried about unprotected intimate. Simone took care of this. We were healthy and monogamous. Simone took the pills, but I don't think she did. Then, at the beginning of her second year of medical school, she announced her pregnancy. "I thought you were taking pills," I said. I stopped last month. This way, I can have a baby between semesters. But what then? Everything has already been decided. Don't worry, she said. To some extent, she was right. Both sets of parents were desperate for grandchildren. Simone was an only child, and Mrs. Mercer wanted grandchildren. My parents were in the same despair since my older sister, so to speak, came out of the closet. She admitted to being gay to me. Tara has always been a big sister. Her height is 5 feet 11 inches, which is 5 centimeters lower than I am now, but as a child, she was always taller. She was called beautiful, and she had no shortage of male attention in high school. Tara had what was called a reputation. Well, you know, that pretty girl who is not the easiest to climb but still won't leave a guy in trouble. Tara was never without a date at a dance, but she never managed to get a permanent boyfriend. My mom told her friends how Tara played the field and kept options open. I think that's how it was. When my sister went to college, she dressed more and more like a tomboy. Her hair was becoming shorter and more boyish. For my mom, it was just a temporary phase of life until the day Tara brought her friend home to meet the family. When Tara retired from having children, my parents turned to their daughter-in-law. Simone did not let them down. Little Victoria Tara Louise O'Reilly weighed 3.7 kilograms at birth. My sister became the eldest aunt and moved in with us. At the time, she was working as a probationary officer for the city police. Tara and I managed to remove the potential doctor from using about most of the parenting responsibilities. Simone has one big flaw: at the slightest opportunity, she will try to do everything. I firmly believe that you cannot be a medical student and a full-time mother of a newborn. Simone, of course, did not agree. If I had not intervened, she would have been exhausted, and in the end, would not have coped either as a student or as a mother. This became a turbulence and a pattern in our marriage. Simone fought to be the superwoman and mom, and I played the role of the strict husband and dad who set boundaries. It was, you study, and Tara and I do Vicky and household chores. In the end, my sister and I came to a system that even Simone could understand was the best for Via. And it was Tara who pushed me to the idea of getting a legal education. You'll never make a police officer, Jimmy, but maybe a lawyer, Tara said. It was a difficult period. I was working at a cable company, caring for my daughter, and going to law school. I got through this thanks to Tara and Simone. Oddly enough, thanks to the difficulties I faced, I became a better person. Simone and Tara were at my law school graduation, although neither of them could stay for the celebration my parents threw. Simone and Tara worked the evening shift. We did not know that 6 years later, it would be me who would defend Tara from false accusations made to get rid of the gay sergeant. Tara never had it easy in the male-dominated police force. As a result, we entered into a settlement agreement with an apology, and Tara opened her own security company. On the other hand, I made enemies among almost all active officers. But it was worth it. By that time, baby Beth had arrived, and life had returned to normal. Simone completed her residency in surgery, and I had a small internship. We were happy, and then Kevin McFarland returned from Liberia. Kevin, an emergency physician, was Simone's friend from medical school. Kevin returned with stories of work done in Africa as doctors should. I think in an emergency, I would hope that someone else would be available, he said. He was an excellent academic student who had no talent for medicine, which I came to regard as an art rather than a science. By the time Kevin returned, Simone was a board-certified pediatric surgeon. This is one of the highest-paid medical specialties. Simone and I just started to get out of the financial basement. She made 3 times more than me, but my wife was not motivated by money. I can't get what Kevin said out of my head, she whispered in my ear after night. No, I said, you won't go. I know I have too many responsibilities. I need to think about the girls. I'm not free, and I'm not so crazy as to let my wife leave and die. I answered. They wouldn't have killed me, and I could have done so much good. It's just 1 year. My wife asked me to help her play Doctors Without Borders for a year. She knew there was nothing I couldn't handle. I'm like, give me a problem, and I'll find a solution, I said. This made me a good, if not always honest, lawyer. Simone also knew that I would do anything for her. But could I let her put herself in danger? It's too dangerous, I said. I listened to Kevin and knew that what he had to say would be like catnip to my wife. I made inquiries and didn't like anything I heard. The group goes where others don't go. MSF is deployed to war zones in Afghanistan, Yemen, and Syria. Their targets are victims of airstrikes intended for others. And then there will be the Democratic Republic of Congo, where violence was deliberately directed against health workers. Everything told me that I should talk Simone out of going. But I knew that ultimately, I wouldn't be able to do that. Another woman would have been content with a successful career and family. But Simone could never be just another woman or a doctor. There were people who needed help, children who needed her special skills. She had to go, and I knew it. I could have stopped her, perhaps I should have stopped her. But I loved her, and when you really love someone, you can feel their needs even more than your own. So, in the end, I helped her. I hugged our girls as they sat on the living room couch, and Simone knelt in front of us, explaining why she had to go help children in Africa. When Simone announced to the rest of her family that she would be leaving her surgical residency for at least a year to take a job with Doctors Without Borders, it was Tara who was the first to come to my aid. By then, Vicky was 7 years old, and Beth, short for Elizabeth, was 5. Tara brought Lisa to the table. My sister is the very definition of the word tomboy. She had once been a very beautiful girl, but now she had turned into a boyish creature, still beautiful, but there was no way she could be mistaken for heterosexual. Tara prefers her women to be feminine, and Lisa is 100% feminine. She is what I think is called a feminine gay girl. Lisa is petite, one of those women who can wear anything and look good doing it. Very small in stature with long blonde hair all along her back, the kind of girl who looks more feminine even in jeans. When Simone went to Africa, Lisa became a feminine influence for my daughters, buying them clothes and watching Frozen and Pocahontas with them. Tara and I supported our father's position. I needed help with my wife leaving. I lost not only my spouse but also my income. My wife's new income was only enough to cover her student loan bills. I had to pay my loans, mortgage, and house bills. The average criminal lawyer is lucky if, after all expenses, he has $50,000 left over a year. When Simone left, I was earning $60,000 because I spent every free hour looking for new things to do. I think I wrote a will for every family member and friend I had, but mainly hunted in city courts looking for clients who were driving under the influence of alcohol, disturbing public order, or committing obscenity. We survived and even thrived, but I couldn't have done it without Tara and Lisa. Most of all, I was worried. The news from the Democratic Republic of Congo has never been good. I didn't want Simone to leave. Why her family was not enough for her, I never understood. I also did not understand how a mother of small children could so decisively put herself in danger. Everything I had learned about the Congo told me it was a place to be avoided at all costs. The first 2 months of her absence, she was in France on an internship. We kept in good contact every day, as a phone call, 2 sometimes 3 emails a day to me and the girls. For the next 2 months, everything was exactly the same, but then it changed. There were calls, maybe once a week, and occasionally letters. Changes did not happen slowly, everything happened somehow at once. There was a dramatic shift, and then things moved on. Letters began to arrive once every 2 weeks, and calls once a month. Mostly she talked to girls. Something happened during her 3rd month in the Congo. I never found out what exactly. All I knew was that my wife never came back to me. I was celibate for 14 months, but was Simone just as abstinent? I knew how, medical staff could be. Was my wife having extramarital night while I stayed home and took care of the children? Is Dr. Faraji making this all up, or does he have knowledge that I lacked? I was worried about my wife's safety, but shouldn't I be worried about her fidelity? When I pulled up in my Honda CR-V, my daughters were already waiting at the curb. Vicky became a responsible older sister. She held Beth's hand and waited patiently on the side of the road for me to arrive. Being motherless has made my daughters more responsible and less dependent. "Hi, Dad," Vicky said, opening the door and helping her sister enter. "What are we having for dinner?" Beth asked, buckling herself into the only seat left in the car. "I think Aunt Tara will bring liver and onions," I teased. "No, he won't." Lisa won't let her, Beth insisted. Dad, Vicky begged. Well, you know your mom will be late, and Aunt Tara really likes liver, the girls said in unison. When we arrived home, the girls burst from the garage into the kitchen. They protested against the liver when they saw boxes of pizza sitting on the kitchen table. Aunt Lisa assured them that she would never allow Aunt Tara to feed them liver. Simone didn't come home for dinner, but I didn't expect her to come. The meeting would be followed by a cocktail reception for the big shots, and Simone would use the opportunity to argue for greater support for Doctors Without Borders. She arrived home around 8, just as I was giving the girls a bath. Tara and Lisa stayed until I put the girls to bed. They said they wanted to talk to us about something. After the girls had settled down, Tara took out the bottle of wine she had bought and settled down on the sofa in the living room. I want you to be the first to know that I asked Lisa to marry me, Tara began again. Simone was the first to congratulate, and a second later, I followed, even though I knew how close the two women were. They took me by surprise. Continue, Lisa pushed. Well, the reason we're getting married is because your sister wants to say that we are going to get married and have children, Lisa told me. Okay, well, you will become happy parents, I said. Simone fidgeted restlessly next to me. I was missing something that all three women instinctively understood. Jim, we want you to be the biological father, Tara said. This made me a little taken aback, but before I could come to my senses, Lisa intervened. It's not just that you are Tara's biological brother. I want my children to have a father like I know you. I can't imagine a better man to be the father of our children. We only ask that you help fertilize, said Lisa. They puzzled me, and I felt an icy cold emanating from Simone. Can you give me time to think? I was on the safe side, of course, they agreed, and we continued to discuss their wedding plans until they left. Simone was sitting on the edge of our bed, wearing an old terry robe over a closed nightgown. Before leaving for Africa, she slept with me without clothes. Now she was hiding her body from me. I saw that she was worried. What do you think about it? She asked. About what? You know, about donating to Tara and Lisa, she said. Actually, I don't quite understand, I said, slightly flat, as you'd expect. What were you thinking? Are we really so far apart that you can't understand how I feel about this? Well, I didn't think you'd be happy, but you didn't say no. And this is just donating your seed. I thought, what would this mean for the girls? I don't think anyone planned to tell them this until they were adults. But what if something happens to Lisa and Tara? These will be your children if the worst happens. They will become my children regardless of who impregnated them. Tara is my sister, our children are her nieces. She and Lisa proved that it meant a lot to them while you were gone. We owe them a lot. It will be difficult for me to refuse them such a small request, I said. Simone didn't look happy. I want to think and talk about this when I'm not so tired, she said. That's good, go and get some sleep, we'll talk tomorrow evening. I cannot tomorrow evening, I promised to go out from work with my employees to celebrate. Today, I received an award that Claire said you know about. What did you do this evening? Simone didn't seem pleased with my question. Today was a holiday for management. I met with the hospital's executive committee after the awards ceremony. I may be offered a leadership position. Oh, and when did you plan to celebrate with your family? Please, Jimmy, don't be like that. I'm doing the best I can, she said, pausing to catch her breath. Everything seems strange when you leave like I did. You expect that when you return, everything will be the same. But that's not true. Everyone went ahead, even worse, you are different, and you can't do anything about it. You've seen things, you've had experience. Not all of it is bad, but some of it is so terrible, she suddenly began to sob. I walked up to the bed, hugged her, and pulled her towards me. For a moment, Simone and I became the same, a husband and his wife working on what happened to her. But then the moment passed, and she pulled away, and the curtain fell. That night, I went to bed with the doctor of the year, not my wife. But the night was not without intim, like many other evenings after Simone returned. We had intercourse, this had become a habit, and Simone started it all. In the first weeks after returning, Simone was a little hesitant when it came to night after a long lull. I was impatient to resume marital relations. Simone acted hesitant at first, as if she wasn't sure of me, but everything quickly changed. Within 2 weeks of returning home, Simone became very aggressive in bed. This change was unsettling. When we first got married, we bought the book The Joys of Nye and worked through it. Simone had never been an adventurer and hated giving me pleasure but loved receiving it. After Africa, Simone became a tigress in bed and as a prelude to intimacy resorted to pleasurable attacks that made her heart skip a beat. If before it was a lot of once or twice a week, now it was every night and twice a day if our weekends coincided. But there was no more love. I had a clear feeling that all we were doing was having an intimate. We excited each other as if Simone had some kind of obsessive craving that demanded satisfaction every night. The wife I knew was gone, replaced by a surrogate with too much intim. My morning started at 4 to 6. After getting up, showering, and shaving, I woke up the girls. They were good little soldiers and went to the bathroom themselves while I got dressed. When I was ready to start the day, I helped the girls get dressed. It was a routine that I had perfected over the past year. Breakfast was eaten, and lunch was prepared. We were heading to the garage. I took the girls to school and then went to the magistrate's court. Most days went like this, but on Fridays, it was earlier because I needed to consult with the assistant district attorney before Friday's magistrate court. The judge officially took the bench at 9:30, but rarely sat down before 10, and then only if the assistant district attorney was ready. She came at 8 to begin making deals, which were blessed by the judge from the bench. Simone appeared in a robe just as the girls and I were leaving. "Kiss Mom goodbye," I said. "Bye, Mom," they said, kissing Mom on the cheek. "How about a kiss from my husband?" Simone asked when I was almost out the door. I turned and kissed her briefly on the lips. "I won't be too late tonight," she said. I left Simone knowing she would run 3 miles before work. Another change after her African trip, the old Simone did Pilates and yoga, and the new woman ran 3 miles every weekday morning and 5 miles on the weekends. I think she was in the best shape of her entire life, and of course, she looked great. All this seemed to only increase the distance between us. In the magistrate's court, the assistant prosecutor sat in a tiny room off to the side. There was enough space for a small table behind which sat a pretty young woman, an assistant prosecutor. There was one empty chair for the defense lawyer. My colleagues from the lower ranks of the criminal defense profession lined up in the hall. I knew them all but not very well. We were a friendly, cheerful company. My criminal defense colleagues were oblivious to my somewhat dubious reputation. It's hard to keep your hands clean when representing those who work on the dirty side of the street. Representing your client vigorously sometimes means breaking the rules. I may have influenced several witnesses, told the client to get rid of some evidence before the police thought of seizing it. I was a good lawyer but not always a good citizen. Before I could open my mouth, the assistant prosecutor handed me her paper with the disposition of the prosecution. Or she said, referring to the designation of refusal to consider a violation or N is nothing more than the dismissal of charges. The best thing you can do on your first appearance. Which one exactly? I stuttered. All 5, she said. Look carefully at the charge sheet. She pointed to the initials next to each client's name. The letters SK were written very clearly. The prosecutor was Stanislas Katsaros, known as Stan. He was very proud of his Greek heritage. As the saying goes, beware of Greeks who bring gifts, but don't look a gift horse in the mouth. It was certainly a gift that just brought me a fee of $800 in each of the 5 cases, for $1,000. The question, however, was, what does Stan want? Politicians do nothing without a purpose. If Stan wanted a favor, he didn't ask for it. The pretty assistant district attorney looked at me and shrugged. Obviously, she no more understood what was happening than I did. I returned to my office at 10 o'clock in the morning. June was waiting for me there. June is one of my employees, a 28-year-old woman with 5 children. The eldest girl is 14, and the remaining 4 are less than 10. The 5 children have 3 fathers, and June has never married. She does a good job of managing my calendar and delivering documents. She would never have made it as a paralegal or secretary in a big firm, but I am engaged in individual practice, and everything suits me. Every day, June spends a significant amount of time on the phone dealing with family issues, with her mother who lives with her and looks after June's children. Prosecutor Stanislaus Katsaros wants to see you, June said when I asked. It's about 3 o'clock in his office this afternoon. Doesn't waste time, I thought, but what might the prosecutor want from me? Stan met me in his office, along with his chief assistant, Betty Gray. There have always been rumors about Stan and Betty. The prosecutor was over 50, and Betty was in her early 40s. And if she was not classically beautiful, she was still a pretty, lonely woman. Despite the rumors, I knew for sure that their relationship was purely professional. Firstly, Stan was married to a real Greek beauty brought from the old country and who was 20 years his junior. On the other hand, Betty has several young men with whom she dates alone. Few people know about Betty's stable, but there's little that can be hidden from my investigative sister. Stan and Betty sat me down on an old worn leather couch in the DA's inner office and offered me coffee. When his cup was half full of cream and sugar, Stan added coffee and began to explain the reason for calling our meeting. Have you heard the allegations regarding the Van Patten Correctional Facility? He began. Of course, I heard it. Even my mind, busy with household chores, could not miss such a juicy scandal. Our local correctional facility began life as a minimum security prison for male inmates. Most of its former male inmates served only a few months before being released, often remaining behind bars only for nights and weekends. Lawsuits over overcrowding at women's prisons to the south and west have forced the state to convert Van Patten into a medium security prison for female inmates. The conversion required nothing more than erecting a fence and stringing razor-sharp wire. Women's prisons are virtually unguarded, as no one has ever heard of an escape from a women's prison. The current scandal is not about security but about intimate. Night in prison is a commodity and is more common than outside. It is simply rampant in women's institutions. A fact compounded by the federal government's insistence on equal employment opportunity. Because of their size and numbers, all opportunities for advancement existed only in male institutions. At the women's facilities, work was easier and safer, but fewer positions meant fewer promotions. As a result, female officers tended to work in male-dominated facilities. There were exceptions related to geography. Most officers came from local communities, and getting a position closer to home, when appointed on the basis of seniority, was what most officers aspired to. Thus, the staffing of male and female officers in women's institutions was approximately 50-50. The civilian staff at Van Patten Penitentiary was predominantly female, but military personnel were evenly divided between the sexes. The current problem arose from complaints of intimate abuse of female prisoners by male officers. These complaints were filed with the State Commission on Corrections, COC. The COC is not the Department of Corrections. The department operates prisons. The commission is a supervisory body created after the ATA riot in 1971. The commission is a toothless watchdog. It reports abuse but has no way to correct the situation. The local district attorney is handling the prosecution. Intimate conduct between an officer and an inmate is a Class D felony at a minimum. Stan Katsaros is the arm of the law who is responsible for taking action on complaints investigated by the commission if necessary. However, corrections officers tend to be conservative Republicans. They have a strong union and tend to come from large families living in close communities. In a county like Van Patten, prosecuting corrections officers is close to political suicide. Most prosecutions of correctional officers, when they occur, tend to be federal. A United States attorney is appointed and serves a larger jurisdiction. New York has only 4 federal districts with 4 U.S. attorneys, but 62 counties, each with its own district attorney. The local district attorney typically only prosecutes inmates or civilian personnel accused of committing a crime on prison grounds. Uniformed personnel are primarily subject to federal prosecution. However, no federal prosecutor will willingly pursue hopeless cases. Convicting someone, even if there is strong evidence of committing an intim crime with an incarcerated offender, is nearly impossible. The U.S. Attorney brushed off a COC report detailing widespread intimate activity at Van Patten Prison. Now the state is putting pressure on Stan to take action. Southern liberals and northern religious conservatives were equally offended by the idea of night behind prison walls. So yes, I heard about Stan's problem, but I didn't see how it affected me. I know about the COC report, I said. Stan wasted no time getting down to business. The governor wants to appoint a special prosecutor, he said, pausing to let me realize this. At first, I didn't want to agree, but I was ready to agree if I was allowed to tell the name of this person. I looked back and forth between Stan and Betty. I couldn't believe he was seriously considering me or that the governor would agree. And what did the governor say? I asked. He agrees as long as it is a Democrat who is not associated with law enforcement or my office. I checked this morning, and you're still registered as a Democrat. It sounded somehow false. I barely knew Stan Katsaros. We communicated only through his subordinates, and the relationship was hostile, and yet he proposed me for an important political post. Of course, my resume was suitable. I was a Democrat, although not an active one, and thanks to my sister, had experience standing up to the local police department. However, it did not pass the smell test. Stan must have seen my hesitation because he pulled out his main weapon. You may be concerned about the issue of compensation. I offered the governor $175 an hour, and he agreed. Next, you don't have to worry about payment. The state will bear all costs as part of my agreement with the governor, Stan said with a sly smile. Lawyers' fees are a strange animal. You can charge $350 an hour, but clients rarely pay the entire bill. In criminal practice, you try to get as big an advance as possible, knowing that this may be the only money you will see. If the client stops paying the bill, you remain on the case until the judge releases you, which is rare. Special prosecutors are another matter. There is no prepayment here. The bill is sent to a government agency, usually the county. County legislatures are never enthusiastic about paying extra bills for prosecutors when they are already paying the DA's salary and expenses. But if the state pays, it's just a matter of filing a bill. You may have to wait 3 to 6 months to get the money, but you will get it. I was already doing the math in my head. There will be a minimum of 3,000 hours, and at $175 an hour, that's over $500,000 over the next 2 years, even with significantly increased office expenses. This could add $150,000 to my bottom line each year. For a solo practitioner like me, who earned only $60,000 last year, this was a fortune. It was too good to be true, but also too good to pass up. Betty outlined the appointment process for the governor's office. She had a draft of my biography and a recommendation from Stan. She suggested that we spend time together over the next 2 days to put everything together. Hopefully, we can agree on an appointment by next week. I left Stan's office in a kind of daze. I returned to my office only at 4 o'clock. Tara was waiting for me. She began to talk about what brought her as soon as the door to my personal office closed. Lisa, and I don't want to put pressure on you, she began. It's clear that Simone is not happy. We don't want to create problems in your marriage. You and Lisa are not the cause of my family problems, and what you ask is fair considering what you both have done for our daughters. Simone will come to her senses. Give her some time, I said. And yet, she began, but I interrupted her. Put this aside. I need your help in a professional matter, I explained Stan Katsaro's proposal. Tara was even more skeptical than I was, but for different reasons. Are you proposing to prosecute correctional officers based on the testimony of easily accessible girls? She asked. Because I guarantee that every one of your complaining witnesses will have on their record a charge of vagrancy, disorderly conduct, or indecent behavior, or at best, a failed molestation charge. At worst, their cases will include charges of servicing men, Tara lectured, returning to the police officer she was at heart. However, technically, it is rape in the 3rd degree. A person is considered incapable of giving consent if A, he is under 17 years of age, or B, mentally, or C, mentally incompetent, or D, physically helpless, or E, placed under the guardianship or supervision of the State Department of Corrections. I read from the criminal code. That's right, and all we need is a jury of 12 to get a guilty verdict, Tara said. No, I need my investigator to get irrefutable evidence, I replied. This is all yes, but I will help. I intend to handle what appears to be a rather bungled case while you work in the background gathering the real evidence. I will look after you so you can work. So, I need you to start immediately, I said. It was a very difficult task, perhaps impossible, but all I had to lose was my less than stellar reputation. The day was important for me, but my parents didn't rest. I still had to pick up my daughters, feed them, and entertain them until bedtime. They must have had a big day too. By 9 o'clock, I put them to bed and put them to sleep. I washed the dishes, tidied up the kitchen, and put away the remains of dinner, and then settled down to wait for Simone. I think I had some vague idea of getting things sorted out with Simone before moving on to the special counsel's cases. Then there may not be time to discuss everything. I must have fallen asleep on the sofa and woke up after midnight. A check of the house showed that my wife was still not home. It was already well after 1:30 when I heard the sound of a car approaching. I looked out the living room window, the garage light was on, and I saw a Porsche sports car in our driveway. My wife drives a BMW. Simone was returning home without a car, and someone gave her a ride. There were 2 people in the front seat of the Porsche, a woman and a man, but I couldn't see them. She leaned over and kissed him. He pulled her close to him, but then they parted, and she shook her head. She got out of the car and walked towards the house. There was enough light to recognize my wife and read the license plate on the Porsche. Apparently, they didn't see me through the window. The light from the garage was shining into their eyes, and the lights in the house were turned off. I returned and sat on the sofa when Simone entered the house. When she turned on the lights in the house, she was amazed to see me sitting there. "Are you awake?" she said as the Porsche pulled out of the driveway. "Did someone give you a ride home?" I asked, as if I didn't know. "Yes, I left my car at the hospital and came with Clara," she said. There was an awkward pause as I stared at her. "Well, I need to get some sleep. Are you coming?" she asked, turning and heading up the stairs to the bedrooms on the second floor. She moved quickly and was already undressing when I entered our bedroom. "You're very late," I said. "Yes, sorry, we had a good time." "I was hoping we could talk," I said. "Tomorrow, when we rest," she said. She gave me a quick kiss on the cheek and slipped into the bathroom to get ready for bed. In the morning when I woke up, she was no longer there. It was her day off, and she was on one of her long morning runs. After lunch, we came with our boys and everything we needed for an impromptu barbecue. Claire and everyone was busy grilling and taking care of the kids, so Simone and I didn't get a chance to talk. When we finally got the kids to bed, Jake called me aside with a couple of beers. "How are you?" he asked. "I think it's okay. Why are you asking?" I answered. "Claire said you two were having trouble, adjusting." "But what gave her this idea?" My question made Jake nervous. It became clear to me that he had a mission to lure me out. "Are you okay?" Jake asked. "No, it's not okay, and Claire knows it. That's why she made you ask," I said. Sorry, but she's worried, and I'm probably worried too." "You were so close. Maybe you should go somewhere, for example, to a psychologist or somewhere else," Jake suggested. He was genuinely concerned and was clearly directed towards the endeavor. His wife controlled his marriage. I knew that, and Claire was close to Simone, so it was Claire or Simone who was feeling me out through Jake. For my part, I think it's a bit of a shock after Simone left, and if she spends more time with her family, everything will get better, I added. Jake accepted this. I wondered if the women would agree. Sunday could have been a day of rest and the Lord's Day, but Simone was on duty at the hospital. That's why we didn't talk that weekend. Despite what I told Jake, I was upset about the kiss my wife gave to the man driving the Porsche. But I had little time to think because the first thing on Monday was the governor's office calling and asking for my resume. After lunch, they made an appointment for the next day at the Capitol. The room on the second floor of the Capitol building was cramped. The woman who rose from the table was young, no more than 20. I noticed her long brown hair and big brown eyes. She was very attractive and dressed expensively. Everything spoke of wealth, Ivy Leagues, and connections. "Thank you for coming, Mr. O'Reilly," she said. "I'm Carrie Wilson." My interview apparently was not with the governor but with a junior aide. "Please take a seat, it won't take much time," she said, waving me towards a chair. Sentenced to 10 years, she served 5. After her release, she joined the Franciscan Sisters. The aspiring nun publicly confessed her sins. Her testimony detailed who did what and when. She seemed like an ideal witness, but she refused to testify. All she wanted was for what she was seeing to stop. She did not want sinners to be punished, but rather to be forgiven. Martyrs make poor witnesses. I rejected the possibility of forcing the nun to testify. A hostile victim turns an administrative process into a criminal one, and the last thing the prosecutor needs is for the victim to ask for forgiveness and make excuses from the witness stand. The commission's other witnesses were another group of released criminals, women much less reformed than Sister Teresa. All the other commission witnesses had one thing in common: all complaints were old. No one could witness anything that had happened in the last 5 years. The statute of limitations for third-degree rape is only 5 years. In essence, their cases were frozen. It didn't make sense. Why bother with an investigation if the main witness won't testify and the other complaint is stale? Once again, there seemed to be a hidden agenda, something unsaid. I needed to talk to Tara and figure out how to move from the old accusations to the current problem. The rapists were offenders. Perhaps my sister can make a connection. I left the COC office puzzled but determined. Tara couldn't tell me much. Yes, there were cases of intimates between officers and prisoners, but not as much as one might expect. Van Patten's real problem was that it was understaffed and overcrowded. "But I'm working on a new lead," Tara said. "About, yes, remember Nancy Silverman?" "Sure, obnoxious ultra-feminist lawyer," I said. "Well, shortly, but obviously, you know who I mean," Tara continued. "She says she might have a lead for me," Tara said, and we left it for later. My next step will be to visit the crime scene, Van Patten Penitentiary. But before that, Simone had the day off, and that evening her mom was going to take our girls to see the latest Disney movie, so I was going home to meet my wife and sort out our problems. I checked the Porsche license plate and unsurprisingly it belonged to Asha Faraji, MD. My wife and I needed to discuss some issues. Simone was waiting for me at home. I found her in the living room dressed in a green teddy and stilettos. Green certainly suited this redhead. The silk and lace teddy did not hide anything important. My rowdy fraternity brothers used to ask if the hair color was the same on top and bottom. Actually, it is not. She stood in our living room like a goddess in her green silk. Her 10 centimeters heels made her taller than me. She handed me a filled martini glass after returning home. A martini had become Simone's favorite drink. She used to rarely drink, but that has changed, an alarming fact considering how promiscuous my wife gets when she drinks. Seeing my indecisiveness, she said, "Not what you expected. I thought we were going to talk." "We'll talk, but later," I replied. We drank. The drink was strong. She then led me by my tie up the stairs to our bedroom. There, she began to undress me, and when I tried to help, she spanked my hands. "Don't take my job away," she said, pulling down my shorts. She knelt down and yanked my boxers off and began to work. I tried to relax and turn off the part of my mind that wanted to ask all the uncomfortable questions. It was my wife, and she could act like she was easily accessible, but she was clearly playing a game that aimed to bridge the gap between us. We got down to dirty night on the bed, then she snuggled up to me and dozed off for a minute. This was the Simone I knew, relaxed and sleepy after intimate, and this was the wife I knew, warm and happy next to me. I did not sleep, I was waiting. This was just a prelude. The questions were ready, and the answers were probably well rehearsed, but I was eager to hear them, and at the same time, I wasn't sure I wanted to. I was caught between the need to know and the fear of knowing. "Hey, baby, did I fall asleep?" she said. I pulled her tightly towards me. "Yes," I said. "I love this woman so much." That's nice," she replied. "It's such a shame to ruin everything, but we need to talk," she said, shifting gears. "First question, who brought you home last Friday night?" "A friend, but what's the matter?" she asked, because I didn't know that Asha Faraji was classified as a friend, I said. "If you know the answer, why ask the question?" "Or should this be an interrogation, counselor?" she said, pulling away a little. We were lying cheek to cheek, and now I turned to look at her. "This is not an interrogation, but the question is better formulated this way. Why do you come home after midnight with such a scoundrel as Faraji?" "First of all, he is not a scoundrel. He is an excellent surgeon and a friend of Claire Hudson." He offered to give us both a ride and accidentally dropped her off first, I explained. There was a connection in the back of my mind that would be important later, but for now, I said, and the fact that he accidentally got into your pants? Well, finally, here it is, she said. What? The lack of trust, the criticism that existed but was not expressed, and the reason why you have been cold and distant since I returned home? Are you blaming me? She paused and took a deep breath. Please, let's not quarrel, it's hard enough without anger. The point of this evening is to start leaving everything behind, she said, trying to keep everything simple and filled with love. You caught me off guard with your question, but I have to remember that I'm married to a lawyer, she added. Who is this Anna? I asked. Anna Sensen from the hospital. I met with her about our problem, and she suggested that we come to counseling together. But first, I have to confess to you, she suggested that I first put you in a positive mood and remind you of our common love, she confessed. Anna is a psychiatrist, short and strong, I acknowledged. Yes, she is very good and has experience in such situations, she agreed. Jimmy, my love, please, now, for our sake, stop playing lawyer, she pleaded. I realized we had a problem as soon as I got off the plane. You have your suspicions. I saw them in your face and felt them in your kiss. Okay, but don't blame me, she said. I won't. This is a very big problem for us, and I admit my guilt. But we need to work together to solve it, I assured her. How can we do this? She asked. I have to get the problem out first, she said, pausing to kiss me before continuing. I was ready for hardships, humid heat, lack of sanitation, and endless bugs, spiders the size of a fist. The terrible food was not a heavy burden, you will lose several kilograms. So what? In such an incredible way, you help people who need it so much. It was the greatest adventure of my life, and every day brought more and more new achievements. The suffering I saw is beyond description, but the feeling you get from relieving that suffering is beyond anything imaginable. But the endless daily horror eventually wears you down. The random-backed rebels make no distinction between combatants and aid workers. Government troops cannot be relied upon. They can be no less dangerous than the rebels. It's hard to tell who, if anyone, is on your side, Simone recounted, seeking sympathy and understanding. I hugged her and said, you knew about it, I warned you before you left. I know, she said, but it is impossible to know horror until you are faced with it, or how great the need for strong hands is until they are around. I desperately needed you, but you were far away, she said, burying her face in my chest, sighing. She began again. Leroy was a tall, handsome black man. He was a Chicago native and a paramedic. I met him on the first day of my stay in Katanga. Leroy had been at camp long enough to know the ropes. He was trying to keep an eye on the new girl from New York. Of course, Leroy wanted to get into my pants and flirted indecently. Many of our work colleagues had intimate relationships. Partly, it was a physical need, but mostly, it was a feeling that death could come tomorrow. I held back. I was married and knew that my husband would not betray me. Why did I have to betray him? Because I was scared and lonely, Simone revealed. Laura was a black nurse from Atlanta. She was my neighbor in the tent. There were 12 countries represented on the medical staff alone, but I tried to stick to the Americans. I became close to Laura. One day, she and her team left for a facility located 5 miles from our main facility and never returned. 2 days passed before their burnt car was found. They found what was left of the men but not of the women. Laura simply disappeared, never to return. It could have been me in her place. I fell into Leroy's arms that night, and for the next 5 months, I was his companion in every way. The day Leroy went home, I met with Jared, a doctor from Los Angeles. I slept with Jared the morning I left. Before you ask, it wasn't just a night, it was something more, but it was only a temporary relationship. My time with Leroy and Jared was a matter of time and place. We did not exist in the world outside the Democratic Republic of Congo. Please tell me you understand, she concluded. I understood. I didn't like it, but I understood what happened. She lay in my bed, completely covering me despite her height of 1.78 meters. She was small and fragile. I loved her very much, but at that moment, I also hated her. She had betrayed me in so many ways, and now I just felt stupid. Say something, she demanded. What should I say? What will help us make things right again? I asked. Anna says that we should go through a consultation together. She says that if we work on this together, we can fix everything. You will go? She asked. I pulled away from her and got out of bed. Where are you going? She demanded. I'll go to counseling, but right now, I need to stay away from you, I said and left the bedroom. When I left, she cried. Continued in the next video. Subscribe to the channel and click on the bell so you don't miss the second final part. The link to the second part will be in the description of this video below. What do you think of our story today? I think finding out from your own wife how she cheated is the worst thing in the world. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. See you in the comments.